know how it feels. My mother working an office her whole life, and stories like this aren't just numbers and views to me. This isn't a fairy tale, something real people go through. If you never felt invisible, the story's for you. Everything, including names and companies, is fictional, but the emotions are real. Don't repeat other people's mistakes.
I knew something was off the second I saw admin override denied blink across my screen. It wasn't an error. It was a warning. My system doesn't deny unless someone tries to crawl where they don't belong. I took a slow breath, cracked my knuckles, and opened the back-end logs. Sure enough, Artyom's company-issued tablet had pinged our infrastructure stack with elevated credential requests. No authorization key, no token, just brute force arrogance wearing a Hugo Boss jacket. That was Monday morning. Just another coffee-stained, cold light, inbox-clogged corporate Monday. I ran point on our infrastructure. Vendor contracts, compliance dashboards, monthly burn rate audits. If it powered the firm behind the scenes, I was the damn extension cord. Stanislav, our CTO, used to call me the quiet core. Now he barely made eye contact. Because Artyom, his son, was the new COO. And unlike Stanislav, who earned every line in his resume the hard way, Artyom earned nothing but boardroom babysitting duties and a self-printed title plaque. Before we dive deeper into this mess, if you're enjoying the story so far, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps the team bring you more of these insane true stories every week. 97% of you listening aren't subscribed. And hey, don't make me hunt you down like I did Artyom's IP address. Now, where was I? Right. The rat in the server. See, Artyom fancied himself a digital visionary. That morning, he decided the legacy systems I built were bloated, inefficient, and holding us back. Translation? He wanted control, without understanding a bite of what that control meant. So when I saw that credential request come through twice, I didn't panic. I logged it. I documented timestamps. Then I sent a neutral, professional email. Hi, Artyom. I noticed an access attempt from your tablet on the core reporting environment. If this was unintentional, no worries. Just let me know and I'll scrub the flag. No reply. 3 hours later, a system heartbeat failed on the financial forecast node. Manual override had been attempted again, this time on a weekend restore backup. He was digging, not subtly, and he was doing it from inside the office, judging by the static IP lock. By 2 p.m., I'd looped in our internal legal liaison, quietly, just to drop a pin. Because what Artyom didn't know, and what Stanislav had long forgotten, was that the infrastructure wasn't owned by the company. It was licensed by my firm. Under a 5-year agreement signed off during a transitional phase when leadership was still outsourcing operations modernization to specialist vendors, like me. They assumed I'd always stay, that I'd always play nice. But when boys with toy titles start pressing buttons they don't understand, sometimes the whole board lights up. The kicker? While I was drafting an internal report on unauthorized access trends, I overheard Artyom in the hallway laughing with 2 analysts. One of them asked him why he kept pushing changes live without consulting me. Artyom scoffed. This would have taken half as long if my dad had just let me run it from the start. She's just overcomplicating it. Legacy people always do. And that's when I opened my drawer, slid out the envelope I'd been keeping sealed for 6 months, and placed my resignation letter flat on the desk. He didn't know it yet, but that one smug sentence would detonate everything he thought he owned. The email landed with the grace of a punch to the face. Subject: Infrastructure Ownership Transition. Message body: just 1 line. Pull your access and delete your files. This project isn't yours anymore. No salutation. No explanation. Just corporate eviction by way of a keyboard warrior in loafers. Artyom didn't even bother to sign it himself. It came from Stanislav's account, which made it all the more insulting. No call, no context, just an edict handed down like I was a temp who forgot to return a badge. Funny thing is, I wasn't even mad. Not anymore. I'd already made peace with how this place viewed people like me. Quiet fixers, foundational, but invisible. But that didn't mean I was going to roll over and let some nepotistic intern turned COO hijack my work like it was an old Google Doc. I took exactly 4 minutes to respond. No emotion, no sass, just facts. Stanislav, I cannot fulfill that request. As outlined in Clause 9b of the Infrastructure License Agreement, this environment remains under exclusive custodial control of my firm, LLC name, through December 31st. Any transfer would require a formal novation agreement signed by both parties and reviewed by legal. I've attached the clause for reference and CC'd legal for clarity. Sent. Delivered. Logged. I knew exactly what they were trying to do. They wanted control. Full, back-end level control. Not to manage, not to improve, to own, to gut. Probably slap a cheap UI on top and call it a transformative solution for the next board deck. Artyom needed a feather in his cap, and my system was the goose he wanted to pluck. But here's the thing about geese. They honk when cornered. And I'd embedded my honk in every single contract, dashboard, and update log. I watched the read receipts roll in. Legal opened the attachment. Stanislav opened the message twice. Artyom? Nothing. Probably too busy playing CIO on Slack. A lesser version of me would have called HR, escalated to the board, begged to explain. But I'm not in the business of begging. I'm in the business of building. And I built this system with contingency triggers for every possible disaster, including entitled COOs trying to steal a crown they didn't earn. So I sat back, cracked open the admin panel, and tagged the system with a legal flag. Custodial dispute, review in progress. It was subtle. Wouldn't block anything, yet, but it would track every action Artyom tried to take, every click, every override. Because if he wanted to test how much control I had, he was about to learn that power doesn't live in titles, it lives in the fine print they never bothered to read. I didn't even need to guess what Artyom would do next. I knew that boy down to his insecure bone marrow. True to form, he didn't read a single word of the clause I'd attached. He just skimmed it, panicked when he saw legal CC'd, and did exactly what I was counting on. He forwarded it. "Handle this," was all he wrote. No context, no diplomacy, just a royal decree from a little prince pretending to wear armor. 10 minutes later, I got the blind copy of legal's reply to the CEO. Subject: immediate risk escalation. Body: you've just terminated your vendor. That was it. One sentence, enough to rupture the entire foundation Artyom thought he was building. Because tucked deep in our Master Services Agreement, line 212 of Appendix C to be exact, was something called the Auto-Release Clause. If the client demanded access revocation or attempted unilateral environment shutdown, all live SLAs would void instantly. No grace period, no mediation, just a clean contractual snap, like a mousetrap. Triggered the moment arrogance touched the cheese, and Artyom hadn't just touched it, he'd licked it clean. I leaned back, clicked over to the control panel, and began the shutdown sequence. Quietly. No flare, no last chance banner, just a soft cascade of graceful exits. Forecasting dashboards, disabled. Workflow automation, halted. Predictive modeling, paused, data encrypted. Vendor nodes, severed. The environment didn't go up in flames. It just exhaled and closed its eyes. Then came the backups. Every single one auto-watermarked, top right corner. LLC name. Proprietary asset. Custodial transfer required. It wasn't even visible to users unless they exported a report. But when they did, that watermark would glare back at them on every slide and every deck they pushed to the board. I zipped and archived the logs. Time-stamped everything, tagged audit trails for breach review, and finally, I closed the environment entirely. There was no ceremony, no announcement, just one quiet line on the internal system status page. Access suspended. License custodianship terminated per MSA Clause 6.3a. I left the office an hour later without saying a word. No bag, no jacket, just my badge in my pocket and a USB drive with the final session logs, which I'd never need, but kept anyway. Because Artyom didn't just unplug the system. He unplugged himself from the only layer keeping the whole damn thing running. And the worst part? He still had no idea what he'd done. Tuesday morning came with a vengeance. The first ping hit my inbox at 6:17 a.m. Can't access KPI dashboard, getting a 503. Then came the calendar invites. Urgent. Forecasting environment down. By 7:12, someone from IT tried calling me directly, twice. I didn't answer. I wasn't their employee, not anymore. I was a vendor they just fired, and vendors don't troubleshoot for free. Meanwhile, Artyom had apparently scheduled a presentation for 9 a.m. to demonstrate the new simplified analytics flow. That was the phrase he used in the meeting invite. I knew because someone forwarded it to me with a crying emoji and a subject line that read, "You seeing this?" At 9:01, he clicked on the dashboard link. At 9:02, every screen in that room filled with a beautiful error. Environment unavailable. License suspended. Please contact infrastructure custodian. No forecast. No cost modeling. No department performance review. Just a sea of broken widgets and blank tiles. The silence must have been deafening. And by Thursday? Oh, it got worse. People still didn't understand the depth of the outage. Most assumed it was just a staging issue or a broken update, until someone from finance tried pulling last quarter's vendor compliance metrics and found nothing. No reports, no charts, no history. It wasn't just an outage. It was amnesia. My system didn't delete their data. It locked it. All historical records were encrypted under a rotating key structure, one that required a live license token to access. And Artyom had cut that cord himself. By Friday afternoon, 4 departments were flying blind. Procurement couldn't see supplier performance, HR couldn't run payroll analytics, strategy couldn't model budget relocations. Even legal, who probably should have seen this coming, was frantically digging through old agreements trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Meanwhile, I was home. Glass of tea, slippers on, watching a true crime doc while Slack screenshots rolled into my private email like little paper birds of panic. One gem stood out. A junior analyst named Kelsey posted in the general channel, why does everything now say property of LLC name on the footer? A minute later, someone else replied, is that a bug or are we being sued? I didn't respond, but I admit, I chuckled, because the watermark wasn't a threat. It was just the truth. Artyom had no idea how many layers of infrastructure he'd just ripped away, or how many teams depended on tools they thought were just buttons on a screen. Buttons I built, buttons I buried, buttons they no longer owned. By Monday morning, the spin machine was in full tilt. I got a message from someone still inside. Just 2 words. Emergency meeting. Apparently, Artyom had gathered all department heads, legal, finance, even a few board members for what he called a controlled update regarding infrastructure realignment. That's how he framed it on the calendar invite. Realignment. Like the system had decided to wander off on its own over the weekend. He walked into the glass-walled conference room like he owned oxygen, smiling, caffeinated, wearing that tight, tailored suit that always screamed, "Daddy bought this." He pulled up a presentation deck, 8 slides deep, all stock images and buzzwords. The opening line? We're sunsetting legacy vendor dependencies to modernize operational control. Someone from strategy raised a hand. So, why can't we see last month's reports? Artyom's jaw twitched. The transition introduced a few access limitations. Temporary. We're already resolving them. That's when Ligal cleared her throat. Actually, we're not. Everyone turned. She scrolled on her tablet, then spoke like she was reading an obituary. Artyom, you issued a directive to revoke vendor credentials and delete environment access. That directive activated an auto-release clause in the MSA, Clause 6.3a, which voided all active SLAs, custodial access, and support privileges, effective immediately. Dead silence. She kept going. What's more concerning is that the environment included embedded audit triggers. Every access attempt, override command, and file deletion since your email has been logged and routed to legal, including your attempt to copy the proprietary schema. Artyom froze. The kind of freeze you see in deer when headlights hit. The color drained from his face, and his clicker hand stopped moving. His slideshow was still up, stuck on a slide that said, "Streamlined Future State." The CEO spoke next. Slowly, like a man remembering he'd left the stove on. Can we recover? Legal didn't blink. Not without board-level reversal, and even then, only if the vendor agrees. Then, as if to put the final nail in, Legal mirrored her screen to the room's display. It was a PDF, my final invoice. Clean, crisp, and irrefutable. Across the top, bold and underlined, support suspended per section 12 MSA. At the bottom, a timestamp followed by the words, environment closure triggered by client action. No further support guaranteed. Nobody said a word. They just stared at the line item totals, the licensing fees, the damage projections, the additional charges for unauthorized access attempts, all calculated and contractually enforced. Artyom looked like he wanted to speak, to explain, but the only thing he managed was a strained. This was supposed to be simple. The CFO, who'd been silent the whole time, finally leaned forward. No emotion, just the quiet tone of a man who hated wasting money. You mean to tell me you didn't know she owned the stack? Artyom didn't answer. He didn't have to, because now everyone else knew exactly who had really been in control, and who had just lost it all with one stupid email. By noon, they were flying blind. Every system, every portal, every widget they'd once taken for granted now read the same 5 words. Access suspended. Contact license holder. It didn't just hit dashboards. It hit procurement logs, payroll cycles, vendor portals, even internal audit trails. Files they thought they had backed up locally, all encrypted, tracked, time-stamped, bound to a permission structure that had just shut its door. Artyom stormed into legal like a toddler who'd dropped his ice cream. His voice could be heard down the hall. Get him back in. Revoke whatever clause. I don't care. Fix it. Legal didn't even flinch. She slid a folder across the table, my contract, and tapped it once with her pen. You terminated the license holder. That's you, Artyom. You authorize the revocation. Clause 12.4a is triggered. We have no operational control until the board renegotiates custodial rights, which will take a vote, a signed novation, and her approval, which, last I checked, we don't have. He stared at her like she was speaking Morse code. You're legal. Just override it. She closed the folder. There's nothing to override. It's not our system. He looked toward the CFO who'd just walked in, sipping a green juice like this was a routine staff update. The CFO didn't even sit down, just crossed his arms and asked with an eyebrow raised, "Did you even know she owned the stack?" Artyom didn't answer, but the silence did. The system stayed down the rest of the day. No logins, no access keys. The few folks who tried circumventing the portal hit an error I'd designed myself years ago, mostly as a joke. This isn't your playground anymore. Back at my Airbnb in Asheville, I had just finished a late breakfast when my phone buzzed with the alert I'd embedded months ago, one of those just-in-case digital tripwires. 11:58 a.m. EST unauthorized multi-factor request failed. 11:59 a.m. EST emergency override attempted. 12:00 p.m. EST global lockout sequence completed. I closed the alert and took another sip of coffee. I wasn't in the office. I wasn't even in the state, but I knew the exact moment the panic began. Not because someone called me, because the system told me, because I'd built it that way. Control doesn't come from being in the room. It comes from knowing the door only opens when you say so. Legal tore through every archived contract like they were searching for a fire escape in a building already burning. They printed, highlighted, cross-referenced. Paralegals double-checked old emails, scanned inboxes from executives long gone, even tried digging up handwritten margin notes from a CTO who'd retired 3 fiscal years and 2 divorces ago. Nothing. No loophole, no override language, no grace clause to slide through. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, sealed, dated, countersigned, and thoroughly unbreachable without full board consensus. The clause had been buried beneath 4 appendices in the original infrastructure license. Approved during a platform migration Stanislav once called the most boring successful launch we've ever had. That boredom had cost them the vigilance to reread the fine print before they let Artyom steamroll the system. Now they were paying the price. The reinstatement process? Not a simple email, not a VP's backdated approval. It required an official board vote recorded in minutes, accompanied by notarized revisions to the MSA and authenticated by the license holder. That license holder was me, and I wasn't answering their calls. Artyom, once full of press releases and chest-puffed Slack announcements, had gone quiet, completely silent. No streamlining update tweets, no all-hands declarations, just vanished. Then, just like that, He resigned. The announcement came via a one-line email from HR. Effective immediately, Artyom Stanislav will be pursuing other opportunities. No farewell Zoom, no send-off party, not even a donut tray in the break room. He left like a shadow pulled off the wall. They assigned a new systems lead, some poor guy from the analytics team named Brian, who probably thought he'd landed a promotion. First thing he tried to do was log into the core dashboard. Access denied. Then he tried to generate a system credential reset. Permissions failure. Then he found the PDF, the one I'd left in the root directory like a digital tombstone. Governance transfer. Valid only with full signature set. It had 6 signature lines, only 3 were filled in. One of them, the most critical, was mine, and I hadn't signed it. Brian sent a polite, hopeful email to my firm's general inquiry inbox. He received an auto-reply. This environment is protected under custodial suspension. Please consult your board representative for next steps. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything online. I didn't even mention it to my team, because some victories don't need confetti. Some just need a well-placed PDF and the patience to let ego destroy itself. The CEO didn't call right away. First came the assistant's email. Would you be available for a brief conversation with Michael this week? I ignored the first one, replied to the second with, depends on the topic. By the third email, marked urgent, I gave him 20 minutes on a Friday afternoon, not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to hear what apology sounded like when it wore cufflinks. He opened with pleasantries, commented on the weather, asked if I was still based in Charlotte. He'd heard I'd moved. Then the tone shifted. We'd like to bring you back in, as a partner, consultant, whatever role you prefer, full retainer, executive level clearance, direct board access. His voice was calm, measured, practiced. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him slightly uncomfortable. Then I said, the contract did its job, Michael. It protected both sides until someone decided they didn't need protection. He didn't argue, didn't grovel, just exhaled into the phone like a man trying not to sound cornered. Would you at least consider returning on your own terms? I already have, I replied. My terms are boundaries. Instead of myself, I gave him the name of someone I'd trained, Alina. Smart, disciplined, knew the system cold but didn't need to fight for recognition like I had. She would be the new liaison, not internal, not staff, just a secured point of access. My firm would retain custodial rights. No exceptions. All access would now require escrow-secured rotating tokens, temporary, time-gated, auto-expiring, tied to specific clauses in the renegotiated MSA. If someone tried to override permissions or extract encrypted data, the system would lock, notify legal, and, if necessary, self-isolate the instance. There'd be no more RTOMs, no more blind trust. Michael didn't protest. He just said, understood. We'll work with Alina going forward. And that was that. He didn't mention Artyom. Didn't need to. The board had already frozen all infrastructure initiatives indefinitely. Every roadmap item stamped pending custodial approval. Artyom's streamlining vision, canceled. The new policy was simple. If you didn't build it, don't touch it. I closed the call, poured a glass of wine, and sat on the porch as dusk settled in. No resentment, no revenge high. Just a quiet reminder that some offers don't need to be rejected with fire. Sometimes, the cleanest no is a locked door they used to think they owned. Weeks later, the silence turned into structure. Systems came back online, not with a bang, but with precision. The dashboards reloaded, reports flowed, and processes reconnected like veins stitched back to a steady heart. But everything was different now. Every access point, every credential handshake, every audit trail, regulated, recorded, bound by escrow logic. Before anyone could even enter their password, they were greeted by a new banner. Infrastructure and custodial rights held by firm name LLC, licensed through December 31. No internal override permitted without board authorization. No confusion, no ambiguity, just legal clarity projected in Helvetica Neue. People stopped asking who built the system. They started asking how to work within it. Even legal, once buried in frantic searches, now operated with a kind of reverent caution. Every request passed through Alina. She didn't have my tone or my edge, but she didn't need it. The boundary was baked in now. The board didn't even bother pretending they had override authority anymore. They understood. Permanence had teeth. At the annual industry conference, Michael, the CEO, took the stage for his keynote. Polished, buttoned up, still pretending to be unshaken. He opened with a slide that read, "Control versus custodianship, a modern lesson." Then he said, without naming names, sometimes the infrastructure you think you own is just something you're borrowing from someone much smarter than you. And if you're lucky, they build it well enough to protect you even from yourself. He called it a case study in respecting vendor architecture. The room laughed lightly. I watched the live stream from home, coffee in one hand, pen in the other, jotting notes for a new proposal I was drafting for another client. Someone who had already asked the right question from day one. What happens if we break trust? No smile crossed my face. Not from smugness, not from bitterness, just stillness. Like a mechanic who knows every bolt is finally tight, because power doesn't shout. It waits until someone tries to take it.